am fascinated with this indomitable human spirit that we have within us, that spirit that allowed Beethoven to compose this violin concerto, even though he was deaf, that spirit that allows us to sort of rise up and conquer the adversities that we face every day. People tell me there are no words for my pain, or there are no words for my grief. And so I feel we have to use something that is stronger than words. And as Hans Christian Andersen said, where words fail, music speaks. Beethoven in the Face of Adversity is an epic effort to turn suffering into joy, with 50 concerts of the Beethoven Violin Concerto in 250 days. These concerts are a gift that I've made to the world for my 50th birthday in honor of Beethoven's 250th birthday. This project was born out of my own adversity. I was in the midst of a divorce. I had to sell a house, look for another place, and help my 2 teenagers through all of this as well. It was all I could do, really, just to get through one day at a time. And there was really no room in my life, nor time to spend 5 hours a day for a year preparing to play the Beethoven Concerto. And in that moment of grief, Beethoven, I feel, came to me and said, listen, if I managed to write this when I was deaf, isolated, depressed, you can probably figure out how to play this. I felt that if Beethoven was able to help me overcome my adversity, perhaps it might be able to lighten the load for someone else as well.
Nilitoka Kongo, nilikuwa mkimbizi, nikaenda Burundi, kufika Burundi ndo nikakuja hapa Amerika. Mabadiliko ni kusema kama juu Afrika, nilikuwa napenda kucheza kabumbu, lakini sikuwa nafasi ya kwenda kucheza kabumbu sababu kule Afrika maisha tu magumu tu, lakini hapa nikapata timu moja nacheza emo, ndo nikaona maisha yangu kwa vizuri na shule vizuri sana. Nilisikia vizuri juu mimi nikisikia kama vile nasikia kama usingizi unakuja. Nilisikia vizuri kabisa.
My neighbor lost her husband very suddenly, very tragically. At a point which seemed appropriate, I asked her if she would be interested in hearing some beautiful music as part of her healing.
Our friend was going through a lot, and we were trying to suffer with her. This musical performance was really taking us to a place I hadn't been before. Somehow having it 3 feet away and in our own home with our friend was a very moving experience. It's one we'll never forget.
During the second movement, our neighbor found a beautiful picture of her husband. And she said, I would like him to be with us. And she set it beside her on the couch. And it just kind of rose above all the experiences that we have ever had in music before.
The concerto has a wonderful purity. Every measure is gorgeous. There's a wonderful sense of arrival after a long struggle. This is one of the most magnificent compositions ever written.
And this is a concerto that we as musicians hold as sort of the crowning jewel of the violin repertoire.
It sounds effortless when you hear it by great masters, but it is not. It takes a lot of preparation, a lot of work.
Well, I'm here with my 95-year-old mother, and so it was a real treat for me to see Monique and her son do this performance together. The other thing that I took away from this performance was an appreciation for Beethoven as a warrior. That word was used to describe my mother, who decided to have a knee replacement at age 95. And it was a verve for life and a real desire to be productive and contribute and be part of her community. And that's what I heard as I was listening to this Beethoven piece.
Well, of course, we all know Beethoven, and to hear it played as well as it was tonight was a real treat. It's just lucky that we have the opportunity to hear music like this.
It feels so good to have someone say how much it helped with their pain or kind of melted their heart. That's something I really enjoy seeing in people.
At times I play in 100-degree heat with no air conditioning where I can barely shift on the violin. And then sometimes there are pianos or keyboards that are so completely out of tune that it's very difficult to sort of find my center. In these places, the audience is really near me, and I acknowledge their pain, Beethoven's adversities, my own adversities, and we own all of that and then point to this music that allows us to rise above all of that.
Hi Monique, so nice to see you again. I so enjoyed watching that documentary. I participated, as you know, that day, and it was so powerful, your project and just the whole experience. And looking back at it today now, it feels just as powerful and very different at the same time. What does it feel like to you, looking at it now and thinking back to, you know, the whole beginning of the project and our final concert with you?
Well, thanks, Natalie. It was so meaningful for me at the time, and in a way even more so now. I mean, the Edgewood Symphony giving me that opportunity to play the Beethoven Concerto came at such a critical time in my life. And, you know, looking back at it now, I'm just struck by the irony of the whole thing. I mean, here I was focused for personal reasons on Beethoven from the framework of adversity, right, in his life, and everything from, you know, his childhood being, you know, abused by his father to, you know, his deafness, his isolation, his depression, his, you know, suicidal thoughts, and then his having to rise above all of that, and in order to come up with who he was, the greatest iteration of Herr Beethoven, you know, after that. And, you know, because life as he knew it had just come to an absolute standstill as this virtuoso pianist, being the, you know, the darling of the Viennese salons and playing everywhere. All of a sudden, the world that he knew, being in the center, playing the piano for everybody, was, you know, was at a halt. And it was sort of a door that closed for him. And then, first of all, everything was very dark, you know, until he found that light that was Beethoven, the composer. And so now when I look at the irony of that whole thing, here we were setting this up. It ended on December 16th, on his birthday, 2019, setting the stage for this magnificent year that was ahead, which was the kickoff of the celebration of Beethoven's 250th birthday, where the world was going to have all of these concerts and all of these festivals, and, you know, like everything was going to happen, right? And then what happened? So then the concert halls went absolutely deaf, right? Just absolute silence. The irony of that, you know. And then all of the artists, all the musicians, we're experiencing just that, a halt, just a sudden halt to the world as we knew it, to this thing about I am a performer. I'm going to go and people are going to enjoy it. So, and then on top of that, social isolation. Instead of sort of giving Beethoven a pat on the back, hey, thanks for all your adversity, now we have this great music and we're going to have a party, it's more like, oh, now we're going to experience what it was like to suffer in that way, or to be faced with, similar adversity. So I'm just, I'm just overwhelmed at the irony of 2020 being the Beethoven year.
That is such an interesting analogy with the deafness of Beethoven. I didn't really think of it that way, looking at it today. I'm also struck by, it's something that, like me personally, as a musician, I see it as actually an opportunity to be able to give a gift to people who are facing adversity. And there are so many different kinds of adversity that we're talking about today, right? And very different even from what we were talking about in December. And very serious types of adversity as well. And something that really helps me be able to approach all of those difficult conversations and just difficulties in life is kind of the gift of music. And it's something that is very internal and external as well. So that was such a lovely gift that you were able to give through that whole experience as well. I also was curious, looking at all of the different types of adversity that people had faced in all of the different places, and how many times did you play this concerto? This was your 50th performance, or was it the 51st?
Well, that was I think it was officially it was the 50th, and then I continued to play it because there was more demand than the end date there. So I continued, this was December 19th, I continued playing it through the beginning of January for people. Yeah. So there were multiple performances, and what's interesting is, right now, yes, we have, global issues, and everyone is feeling the pain in some way of things that are happening on a global level. And yet what I learned from this is that there's a difference between pain and suffering. And actually that's something that my midwife, had taught me. She's like, how can you stand to be in this profession and witness so much suffering? And she says, no, child, there's a difference between the pain that you're going through, and in the end, there'll be an end to it and you have a child. And she says, I have worked as a cancer nurse in a cancer station, and says the pain, there is somebody who is in pain and is saying goodbye to their child at this moment, and so to put in context, the pain and suffering, I think of it also as there is pain and we're feeling what's happening in the world, and we have no control over that. But to an extent, we have some control over the degree that we suffer ourselves and the degree that we can influence or uplift others so that they suffer less. And I believe that is sort of the sacred duty of artists, is to, if we are in a position to be able to uplift and to relieve suffering. I truly believe that music is this great vessel that can hold the suffering of the world. And that's what we're here for.
Thank you so much for that perspective. That is just, it really is powerful. Back to the word powerful. And it's both global and personal as well, as a musician. And it's valuable as we look back to consider the different perspectives. And we can reimagine how we're going to look at the concert when we revisit the first movement of the Beethoven. Do you have any advice or tips for us to think about? Fun facts, maybe, or just give us a framework to think of as we look back?
Yeah. Well, you know, everything, what's interesting is that all of these performances, so I did, 50 or 60 of them, right? And each one is completely different because of context, right? So if we were having the same conversation and we had a backdrop of, I don't know, Mars, the perception of people watching this would be completely different than here we are in this beautiful Zen garden, right? And so there's a context, and I think anytime we as musicians perform, we're only one part of that, and the audience and the energy that comes in the context of that person's, in this case, the person's adversity, but the energy that we get from the audience is part of it. So if the Beethoven Concerto is, let's say, a drop of yellow paint, and it's going into a small pool of, let's say, red, because I played this concerto the first time was around Christmas time, so red, right? So we're going to get a different combination than, let's say, now that pool of paint is blue, right? And you drop the same Beethoven Concerto, into the context that we have today, and it's going to affect us differently. So what's interesting is that how I played it then and how I played it now is the same because it's the same video. However, we have changed. The world has changed, and so we're watching literally the same thing within a different perspective, in a different context. A fun fact about the Beethoven itself is an adversity fact. Underneath this very sort of serene and cool appearance of every soloist who plays it, there is nothing more anxiety creating than that first 3-minute introduction of the orchestra, when the soloist just has to stand there and your fingers are getting cold and you stand there and just deal with yourself and your nerves and you're sweating. And I think every form of mental calisthenics has been done in those 3 minutes by a violin soloist, because as soon as you enter, you're playing something that sounds very simple, which is just, an arpeggio. But that arpeggio is in octaves, which is hard to play in tune. And then you have to get it to sound beautiful, and then it has some sort of direction. And all of that, just trust me, it gives every violinist the greatest nightmares. And so in terms of a fun fact, that moment of those 3 minutes of doing nothing are some of the most excruciating in the lives of any violinist alive.
Maybe as we watch it, we can all stand in your shoes. Ladies, get your heels out. Gentlemen, stand up, whatever you'd like, and stand there for the 3 minutes and imagine what it's like to be Monique.
Just do some good grounding, some breathing, some, visualization, mantras, whatever,
Yes.
praying, whatever works for you, because that's what every violinist feels who's ever played
I can relate to that as a violinist. I am nowhere near the caliber of a soloist as you are, but as I prepare to play in front of my cats at home, I have a similar challenge. But no, it is. It really is nerve-wracking, and just getting that first note, and then you're off and running. And
yeah, I think it's for anybody. If you let's say you have a job interview, the most horrible time is waiting to get in that door, right? And then once you're in there, then it's fine. It's always the anticipation.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's enough anticipation. And thank you so much for framing this for us and for speaking with us again today and really giving us some interesting perspective. And thank you again.
Thanks to you and the Edgewood Symphony for making this very meaningful thing come true. It's been such a pleasure to work with you, and such a delight to play the Beethoven Concerto over and over and over again. So thank you.
Thank you.